Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. I just want to put on record my admiration for Anne Symonds as one of her main opponents in this Parliament. She was someone who took no prisoners.
Didn't believe in prison.
And she was committed to her position, and we often argued. We were on the committees together as well as in the House together. And I won't go through all the issues now and saying where we disagreed. I think you can work that out. But you do get to admire your opponent for their skill, their diligence, their arguments. It kept me on my toes to try to keep up with her. So I have fond memories of her, and after she left the Parliament, we had a number of little quiet chats. So she never held any animosity to someone who was her opponent on issues, but not in any personal way. So God bless Anne Symonds.
Mr. Shoebridge. Thank you for that.
Mr. Deputy President, when I think of Anne, I think of a woman who was funny, intelligent, irreverent, but above all persistent. And I can't. There are so many occasions where we had meetings, either in this place or in other parts of the state, whether it was on prison reform, or on drug law reform, or on Aboriginal justice, or on gun control, where you would see Anne waiting, often first at the meeting and waiting for us all to turn up, and then making quiet, considered, ego-free contributions to the debate and driving it, I always felt, in a way that showed a fundamental commitment to social justice and a deeply held political philosophy that was based upon ensuring those with less got more. Before I came into this place, and I remember speaking with two of my colleagues, Sylvia Hale and Larry Annan, and both of them said that part of their advice they gave to me was, if Anne Symonds is saying something, you should always listen, take the time and listen. Spend some time and listen to Anne. And in fact, when we heard about the very sad passing of Anne, Lee Annan was one of the first people to contact me and asked if she could have some of her thoughts read onto the record, because of course Lee worked with Anne here in the chamber. And so with the House's indulgence, I will read on the contribution from Lee. Anne Symonds believed in collective action. From her younger days as a teacher, standing up for public education, working with the Waverley community to turn the Bondi Pavilion into a community and cultural centre, to her diverse work as a Labor MP, Anne put people at the centre of her political work. While many of the horrors of the judicial system that Anne campaigned against are still to be remedied, her achievements for women in prison and young people stand to this day. Winning the right for jailed women to have regular time with their children was groundbreaking. Much of Anne's outstanding work has not been recorded, not because it was insignificant, but because Anne's style was unassuming and her commitment was to bring others into the struggle. In 1983, Anne provided great assistance to the Women for Survival movement that staged the 700-strong women's-only peace camp at Pine Gap and support actions around the country. Also in the late 1980s, Anne assisted gun control groups to come together and form a national organisation and helped to organise a number of protests that laid a solid groundwork for reform when politicians of all persuasions came to realise the necessity for stronger gun controls after the Port Arthur massacre. Mr. President, I do want to associate myself with the motion put on by the Honourable Penny Sharp and the sentiments in that motion, and with the sentiments of each of the speakers that we've had today. It's testament to Anne's fundamental decency that it really doesn't matter where you come to from your politics. You acknowledge a woman who wasn't in it for herself, but was in it for those who didn't have a voice.
The Honourable Peter Primrose. I'm following the list.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to also thank you to the Honourable Penny Sharp for bringing this matter before the Parliament today, and I think it's very appropriate on this occasion, on this day, that we deal with someone who is, as an honourable member, was able to bring so many of us in this place together around so many important issues. There are so many occasions on which I had had the privilege of working with Anne. I mean, prior to coming into Parliament through the Nuclear Free Zone Secretariat, here as a member of the Social Issues Committee with Anne on a number of policy matters and pieces of legislation before this House, and all of the statements, all of the sentiments that have been expressed by people indicate Anne's ability to bring people together at the same time as to be absolutely laser focused on the important issues that she was dealing with. One of the things that I learnt very much from Anne was that the ability to, and I think few people, including myself, have had the ability to do it so well, but to actually perceive and turn personal troubles into public issues. It's been mentioned in so many different ways here, but Anne would see matters that everyone else said, isn't that sad? That's dreadful, that's terrible, that's happened to that person. But Anne was able to turn those into matters that were of concern to governments and was saying there are things that we could do about that. And that was exemplified particularly, and I saw it on so many occasions, through her work on the Social Issues Committee. Matters that had been perceived only as things we should be sad about in relation to individuals suddenly became matters that governments were responsible for doing something about. And what I'd like to do is just to quote briefly from one of our inquiries, and that was Anne speaking on the report, the Social Issues report on the 24th of September 97, and the report of children of imprisoned parents. And I'll just make two brief quotes. One, the committee has, as its terms of reference, the problems of young people. The members of the committee dealt with young people in a manner devoid of political debate and were concerned about the policy issues that arose as a result of the hearings. The report makes 97 recommendations relevant to children of imprisoned parents. The report is about children who have done no wrong. Children whose parents go to prison have committed no offence. As our research revealed, children are too often indirectly punished as a result of their separation from their primary carer. The fact that we recognise the pain and suffering of a child separated under these circumstances is one thing. Whether we are prepared to change policies to overcome that unnecessary pain and suffering is another. The Daily Telegraph was unsympathetic to the needs of these children when we released our report on the 21st of July. It did not accept the need to consider the children in this situation, even though they are totally innocent. I am grateful that that is not the response of the members of the committee, and I believe that it will not be the response of the government when it considers the recommendations and findings. Now, I asked the House to consider some of the words. Us, we, pain, children, research, complex problems, change policies, consider unnecessary pain, working together, and the government can do something about it. Anne was hard-headed, she was assertive, she was assertively caring. She was dealing always with complex issues, often emotional issues. She based, however, her findings and her arguments not solely on emotions, but on research, consultations. That's the colleague that I knew. That's the person that I came to respect so much. That's someone that I will genuinely miss. That, to me, was my friend Anne Symonds.
The Honourable Shane Mallard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to briefly contribute to this condolence motion, to associate myself with this condolence motion, and to the moving speech by the Honourable Penny Sharp and the contribution by other members, which has been so eloquent. Anne, as we know, served in the chamber for 16 years, from 1982 to 1998, and I came to know Anne Symonds during this time when I worked here as the executive officer to President Willis in 1993-94, and Anne reached out, and I'll talk about that a bit more, reached out across the aisle to staff as well as to members of parliament who she identified as people that she could be friends with. She was a regular around the President's office in those days, and was attracted to what I would view as progressive Liberals on the government side back then, like Max Willis, Virginia Chadwick, John Ryan, amongst others, who all had in common then and going forward working on the social issues committees. And I, of course, as a trouble-causing progressive young Liberal state president here, was easily attracted to Anne on the issues she cared about, and we became friends. Today, as the chair of social issues in this parliament, on behalf of the committee, we acknowledge Anne's 10 years as a member, chair and deputy chair of the social issues committee. That's probably an unprecedented leadership of that committee. As the Honourable Penny Sharp motion indicates, there were more than 10 inquiries over that time into really important issues like youth violence and children's advocacy, sexual violence, children of imprisoned parents, which you just heard about, guardianship, aged care, nursing homes and hepatitis C. And indeed adoption was another inquiry. I know Max Willis held that inquiry as one of the great achievements of his time in Parliament, the jigsaw legislation. They were all worthy inquiries, important reports that impacted upon government policy across the divide, across the chamber. More recent times, Anne has been regularly in contact with me, up until recent times, in the area of drug law reform, which is something I care about greatly, and I really respect her and the work she did in drug law reform. She was lobbying me pretty heavily to convince Trent Zimmerman, the member for North Sydney, to sign up to be co-chair of the Australian Parliamentary Group of Drug Law Reform, because there was a vacancy there. As much as I cajoled Trent, and I've got a lot of influence on Trent, he said, I'm a bit busy with marriage equality. But now that's been achieved, maybe I should take it back up. On behalf of Anne, I might do that. She did say to me, that'll happen, and then we'll get him onto the job. So, of course, Anne had a considerable impact on drug law reform during her time here, including, as the motion indicates, her chair of the 1997-98 Joint Select Committee inquiry into the establishment of the safe injecting room, as they were called then, but now more correctly understood as a medically supervised injecting centre. As we heard, that didn't lead to it directly, but I certainly have the view that it contributed significantly to the outcome of the drug summit, which she worked on, and then the trial and now the permanency of the medically supervised injecting centre in King's Cross, which has saved hundreds of lives. And therefore, Anne has saved hundreds of lives and influenced by that very courage. And the area of drug law reform, which I strongly care about, I carry forward as much in her memory and the work she's done as I will for what I believe is good, right thing to be doing in terms of harm minimisation. Anne demonstrated some of the values and the principles of compassion and humanity that reaches across the aisle, and that's something very special about this place. And Assembly members say to me, "How come you have such a relationship with your colleagues in the upper house? It doesn't exist so strongly down there." And it's certainly the fact that we, as Penny Sharp indicated in her speech, that Anne pioneered the consensus model of committee work. I didn't know that, but I can see that now. And Max Willis, that's right, and John Ryan and those people who were giants in my view, and I said that in my maiden speech in this place back in the 90s. And that model goes forward because for government to be, or government in office, whenever that would occur, the notion of unanimous reports, worthy reports, comprehensive reports, reports that we as members care about really make a difference, and that brings out the best side of politics, which doesn't often get reported on the media, you know, and more shame it doesn't. So with those few words, fond memories of Anne back in the 90s when I worked here as a young Liberal president pushing for a republic, pushing for, and we had a debate back then about euthanasia, pushing for progressive drug law reform issues. She gravitated to us, and friendship lasted right up until today. As I say, fond memories and a wonderful woman, and my condolences to her family. Thank you.
The Honourable Catherine Cusack.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Very sad occasion. I thank the Honourable Penny Sharp for moving this motion. I was fortunate enough to know the Honourable Anne Symonds. She was first and foremost, a very beautiful person in every way. She was a great friend of the Honourable Virginia Chadwick's, as has been alluded to. I remember Virginia saying to me once, there are two parties in this place, and it's not, the two main parties are not the Labor Party and the Liberal Party. They're the nice people and the nasty people. And Anne Symonds is first and foremost leading the nice people in this parliament. Virginia and Anne were both utterly loyal and faithful to their political parties, but they enjoyed a tremendous friendship, as is described as being across the aisle. But I would say differently that it's because the pair of them were first and foremost outstanding parliamentarians, and it was as parliamentarians that they recognised those qualities. They served in this place at a time when they were pioneering for women. They were both women who saw things that nobody else saw. They had tremendous wisdom and a rapier wit that was never cruel in any way, but very insightful, really insightful and clever, and just tremendous representatives of all of the values of parliamentarians. I recall when Virginia passed away, a member of the Labor Party was kind enough to describe Virginia as a titan of this parliament. And I would say that description is befitting of the Honourable Anne Symonds. Much is said of her contribution, particularly in relation to reform for prisons and for women. I mean, back in the day, she was working with Neville Wran and Helen Larange and those people to establish the Women's Coordination Unit, the first of its kind in Australia. There were many firsts for women in this state. It was a really critical time where equal rights were very much at the forefront, and there were a lot of reluctant people, a lot of reluctant men just generally. And so it was really as much, not so much, I mean, her beliefs and her passion, of course, but it was her skill in navigating the difficulties and the challenges and not being defeated by them and not being bittered by them, but just constantly continuing on. And you've heard many members on this side of the House talk about how she's reached out to us in government. So the fact that her party is not in power does not lessen her commitment. She's still using all of those skills and in the nicest way possible, reaching out on behalf of those causes that she championed. And in particular, I spent quite some time talking to her about Shine for Kids and women in prisons. And goodness me, those organisations just talk about how they would never be in the position that they're in if it wasn't for the Honourable Anne Symonds and the guidance that she gave them. I think she chaired the organisation for a while. But of course, all of those issues only ever came to the fore in the first place because of her landmark report as chair of the Social Issues Committee. I remember when Virginia passed away, her funeral was in Newcastle, but there was a very large memorial service held here in the Strangers, and Anne spoke at that. She talked, and I would like to recount this story because it really just said it all about those women in that time and things that I hope are not forgotten and what this House can be capable of. But she talked about the struggle that they had, both as women, trying to, I suppose, prove themselves for all women, and that nothing was a problem, and so you never complained and you never showed stress. But on one occasion, she had a very difficult family emergency. She asked the Labor Party for a pair that night. I don't think she had a good relationship with the whip at the time. I can't remember the details, but she was denied a pair. And I think she went to Virginia's office. She was very distressed, I think, and she was in tears. And Virginia said to her, "You go, Anne, and you go for as long as you like. I'll be your pair." And it was such a testimony, I think, to the character of those women and the way they never lost touch with the things that are important and recognised the opportunity that they have in this place. Their speeches were pithy, there were no notes, they were great orators, and was so composed and so dignified and yet so determined in the causes that she championed. She made a real difference in terms of her work, but I feel the manner in which she presented and treated her colleagues in this House has left an incredible mark, not just on us as individuals, but on our standards in this place. And everybody who had the privilege of meeting her would say the same thing. I want to give my condolences to her family, but I also feel very thankful that this place had the likes of Anne Symonds, and I thank the honourable member again for this motion.
Any member seeking the call? The Honourable Penny Sharp in reply.
Thank you, everyone. I just want to thank everyone for their contributions. There's not really much more to say, except we love you, Anne.
The Honourable Penny Sharp has moved motion 2653 in respect of the Honourable Anne Symonds. All in favour of the motion say aye. Aye. Against say no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it.